everybody. I'll get started. Thank you for coming. I wanted to start before I actually begin the talk just by plugging our conference, LibrePlanet. Will be happening in Cambridge in March. That's Cambridge, US, where the FSF is located. We have a great lineup planned. Richard Sullivan is going to start things off. We have keynotes by Karen Sandler and Mako Hill, presentation of the Free Software Awards, which we do every year. Got some great speakers lined up, people from EFF, April, which is a French free software activist organization. We have people coming from all over the world, Mexico, Japan, Czech Republic, in order to speak and be there. So that's March 21st and 22nd. And, cross your fingers the weather will be better by then, not like it is now. The theme of the conference is free software everywhere, and which is, ties in pretty well to what I'm going to talk about today. It's going to be an extra special edition of the conference because it's the FSF's 30th anniversary also this year. And speaking of that, mark your calendars for October, the weekend of October 3rd, 4th, because we'll be having an event to celebrate the anniversary again in Boston and Cambridge. We'll also be encouraging people to run other kinds of events around the world in order to do free software activist things and celebrate the history of free software. So more information will be forthcoming, but please do mark your calendars there. So I've been at the FSF since 2003. I've been the executive director since 2011. Today I want to talk about why free software needs your vote and what that means. So free software for the FSF is a social movement. It's not just a way of writing programs or making code. And the movement has some pretty lofty goals. We're trying to change the opinions and habits of millions of people, maybe billions of people around the world right now, and the practices of some of the largest, most powerful corporations that exist, including and the practices of the world's governments at the country level and just about every country and all the way down to the city and local level. So we want to get all those people and all of those groups using free software, and our message is very radical for people. It's radical not in political terms necessarily, but it's radical in the way that it flies in the face of everything that they've been hear about computers and software from just about every other source. We're trying to get people to demand rights that they aren't, in a lot of cases, even aware that they could demand. That we're trying to get them to demand better treatment from devices that have been treating them that way for their whole lives. So this is a very challenging goal and a very big project, and it's going to take a worldwide movement in order to accomplish it. So this presentation it's about one line of approach for talking to people about why computer user freedom is important and why free software is a precondition for that. And that's a lot of what I do at the FSF is to work with our team, our staff, to come up with new approaches, and I mean plural because it takes different approaches for different audiences, different approaches to achieve different goals. So I help work on that with our team there, and they're all designed to get to the same endpoint, which is the goal of eliminating proprietary software and having all software be free. But we have to have approaches in particular that work for people that don't write software themselves, because we don't want just to win freedom for programmers. We want to win freedom for all computer users. And that aspect of our work at the FSF is really close to my heart because I didn't come to the FSF as a programmer. I came to the FSF actually with a Master of Fine Arts in Writing and Poetics from the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. That's a real place. I'm not making it up. My degree is real. But that's the background that I came from. And, I liked to tinker with computers, and I ran a bulletin board system as a kid. It was definitely one of my main hobbies. But the only language I knew how to program in when I got to the FSF was Commodore Basic, which wasn't really going to cut it. So to me, it's important to make sure that we are reaching out to people and explaining to them why this is important, even if they're never going to modify code themselves. And we are the Free Software Foundation, but we aren't out there trying to save all of the little softwares, right? The Free Software Foundation is about winning freedom for users and individuals, and we're trying to usher in a society that respects individual freedoms. And free software is such an important precondition for that we have a foundation just for it. But we have to keep in mind that the goal here is protection for users, not for the software itself. And I think that's another way that the FSF message differs from a lot of other people and organizations in this space promoting the same kind of software. So what is our message for people who aren't software developers? It's that you should control your computer and rather than your computer controlling you. And that includes identifying what is actually a computer. So that includes identifying, encouraging people to think of their phone as a computer because it is. It's capable of running a lot more software than what they give to you. It makes people, we need to get people to think of their Samsung television as a computer so they can demand the same control over that as they do over their laptop, and they can maybe stop it from recording their personal conversations in their living room while it's trying to receive voice commands. So I chose this topic for this audience because I think that probably a lot of you are developers or at least more technically oriented than the average bear, and you probably want to be able to communicate why you think free software is important to your friends and family who aren't as technical or aren't as interested. So I'm hoping we can do some brainstorming here about that as well, in addition to the approach that I'm going to present. So our goal is to have all computer users be able to do everything they need to do on any computer using only free software. So in the FSF and GNU's ideal world, proprietary software doesn't exist. And that's because free software is necessary to empower users, and proprietary software, while it can enable users to do different things, it doesn't empower users. It provides users different capabilities, but it doesn't provide, the capabilities are defined only by the limits that the proprietary software company sets. If they don't permit you to do something, if they don't permit you to share the software, if they don't permit you to look at the code to see how it works, then it only enables you to do everything you want to do insofar as the proprietary developer agrees with it. So the App Store only allows you to submit applications that Apple agrees with. You can only do things on your iPhone that Apple allows you to do. So that can be confusing sometimes for people to differentiate between actual empowerment and just capability to do something. And as we know, free software sometimes falls a bit behind in the capability to do something category, but it always excels in the empowerment category. So free software is defined by the 4 freedoms. I'm actually here today to announce the 5th freedom. Okay, no, I'm not. But I should probably start putting that in my talk descriptions. I think I might get a lot more acceptances if I started promising that, at least for a little while. So 2 of the freedoms out of the 4 are not like the other 2. Okay, so first we have 2 freedoms that clearly matter for everybody. So we have freedom 0, the freedom to run the program for any purpose. That's pretty easy to explain to people. Everybody wants to be able to run software on their computer to do what they want. That's why they're using the computer in the first place. If Microsoft tried to put code into Office that would not allow you to write the sentence, Microsoft has been found sharing backdoors with the NSA, then people would rebel against that. Your software shouldn't restrict what you do with it. That's a very easy one to explain to people, I find. What's that? They do actually put that in the EULA, like ebook authoring tool that said that you could only, if you use that tool to author an ebook, you could only distribute the ebook through Apple's distribution channel. So they do sneak that stuff into the EULA. And there are usually restrictions on running programs. Most programs say that you can't, reverse engineer them. Proprietary programs say you can't reverse engineer them, which involves a restriction on running the program. So they're out there, but just in terms of explaining to people, it's a pretty easy one for people to grasp. And we have the freedom to redistribute copies so you can help your neighbor, so you can help your neighbor. That's another one that people are pretty, they'll warm up to it as long as you can convince them that sharing the program doesn't steal bread from the mouths of starving programmers in Africa, right? You just need to be able to convince people that we can still have software in a world where software is freely shareable, that there are programmers in the world who actually want to write software that's then shared in this fashion. As long as you can get over that hurdle, I think everybody who uses a computer, all things being equal, would like to be able to hand a copy of a cool program or send a copy of a cool program to their friends and family. That's something that people would like to be able to do if they thought that it didn't hurt anybody else. But then we have these 2 freedoms which seem to matter only to people who have more knowledge about and interest in computer software. They seem to only matter to people who know what source code is and are inclined to learn how to change it. And beyond that are so brazen as to want to actually share what they do and make with other people. So these are the ones that we have the most difficulty explaining. The freedom 1, or not going in order obviously, the freedom to study how the program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. and freedom 3, the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others. So the challenge here is, why does anybody who does not plan to do either one of those things, like the last thing they want to do on a Saturday afternoon is sit down and look at the source code for the Office suite that they're using, and they have no plans to learn how to make changes to the program, how do we explain why it's still important to demand these freedoms? Well, people can understand pretty easily that the characteristics of free software means that it can, in theory, do a much better job of protecting any individual's interests, even if they're not a programmer. So because of these basic traits of free software, it's really hard to keep malware, backdoors, annoying things existing in free programs. Because if if my version of the Office suite transmitted everything that you typed into it to my house so that I could blackmail you, but that was a free program, then somebody else could just grab the source code, remove the backdoor, and redistribute it, and people would use that version instead. So free software, we can explain that if all of the code in the world were available as free software, then we would be protected against a lot of the abuses that we experience from Microsoft and Apple. We wouldn't have Amazon deleting our books remotely from the Kindle. We wouldn't have Skype sharing conversations with the NSA through a backdoor because someone would make better versions of those programs. And it's also similar to other freedoms and flexibility that people are used to with other objects. The ability to take your car to a mechanic that you choose, or to evaluate multiple contractors for an improvement to your home instead of just being forced to go with the original builder for your home. People are used to those kinds of freedoms and choices with other objects in their lives. So I think that's a powerful argument, and that's a good argument. Those are good analogies. People can request and commission the same kinds of changes to free programs that they could to their car or their house. But the problem with those arguments is that they're not really, they're not ethical arguments. They're not, the same level as free speech or freedom of the press. These are arguments that can, in some cases, be trumped by proprietary software. If the reason you like free software is because you can ask somebody to make it better for you, well, what happens when they don't do it, right? What happens if they say, no, we don't like that idea? You're not actually capable yourself because you're not a developer. You can't go and write your own program with that feature or make the patch yourself. So in cases where the proprietary software does what people want a little better, or maybe people feel like Apple is giving them, what they want with their software most of the time. That in those situations, it's hard to convey the importance of free software if that's the kind of argument that we're relying on. But this dynamic of it being hard to convince people why they should care about modifying things that they're not actually going to ever modify isn't unique to free software. We can see something similar in the right to repair movements that have been going on in the U.S. So people have grown up in history being able to work on their cars themselves, or have their mechanic friend look at their car, or take the car to whatever mechanic that they want. They haven't had to take it to the dealership if they didn't want to. And modern cars have tried to take that ability and that right away. They've made it harder for you to get the diagnostic information from the car computer. They've bolted parts on with fasteners that require machine shop level tools to work with. They've tried to argue that it's illegal for you to access your car's diagnostic computer. So the difference in this case, though, is that the rights repair movement has a big advantage that people used to have this freedom, and now it's being taken away. Free software, I think, is in a more difficult situation because people have never been used to having this freedom. If you look back to the origins of the free software movement with Richard Stallman, this is kind of what motivated him. There was a culture of sharing code and software on computers, and then companies moved in and tried to start distributing their software on proprietary terms and refused to show other people using the software the code that was making it run. So back then, I think the similar dynamic is why the free software movement got off to a big start. But since then, that's certainly not the world that most people have grown up with when it comes to using computers, and it's getting worse in this way because kids are growing up now using, iPads, and the Commodore was proprietary, but at least you could boot it and start typing programs and learn how to run things on your own computer. With an iPad, you are not allowed to write programs on your own computer unless you register with Apple first and pay some money and get a developer certificate and sign your program and install. It's much more difficult. So people are less used that less than ever used to the idea that they should be able to modify and do things on their computers. So this is the repair manual for my beloved 1991 Pontiac Grand Am, the only car I've ever owned. So I had it from the time I was 16 until my early 30s, so like yesterday. Um, so I spent a lot of time with this manual trying to learn how to fix my own car. I got bold enough that I then started to work on my friends' cars. Well, you can kind of see how well that went as my car is loaded up on a tow truck here to be towed away to its final resting place. This wasn't my fault, actually. It was a leak in the windshield, and the car filled up with water, and I didn't notice it for a week. And the inside basically rotted between the water and the sunshine. So I donated it to a public radio station in Boston, WBUR, largely because they started providing their audio stream in Ogg Vorbis at the FSF's request. So I gave them my old crappy car as a thank you. And little known fact, you can actually donate your old crappy car to the FSF. We don't get the car at our office. If you've ever been to downtown Boston, you know that it's really hard to drive a car anywhere near the FSF office. But there's an intermediary organization that takes the car and sells it and then donates the funds to us. And this happens probably about, I don't know, I think we get one car a year. Pretty cool. So I want to pause here and ask, can I get a show of hands? So these kids are taking the pin it thing, I think, the wrong way. But how many of you have modified a program or written a program sometime in the last year? Okay, so a good number of people that have at least, poked at some code. How many of you have, of everybody, have ever convinced somebody to use GNU Linux or otherwise support free software ideals? Successfully, yeah. Not just badgered people until they told you to go away. Yeah. Great. Does anybody want to share any stories about how they managed to do it in short description of what approach, what argument worked? Okay, I think, so they want me to repeat the questions, but I think this microphone works. There we go.
This is a sappy love story about how this guy and I met in college, and right at the beginning of our relationship was actually when he got into Linux.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also when my old iBook was about to have its support rolled back. And so he ended up putting Linux on it for me,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could keep using it. And my computer kept working, and we kept hanging out. And now we're married, and we have a completely free software and almost all free hardware household now.
That's fantastic.
We're very happy.
So that's great. So the thing that worked there, other than love, was that something that you were on a sort of a treadmill that you didn't want to be on anymore. The proprietary software company was going to do something, was going to force something on you that you didn't want to happen, so you got off the treadmill. I think that's a great. I've seen that approach work in many cases too. I think it is. It's just quiet.
I have a business called Mobile PC Clinic, and I just did a house call to a rich neighbor's house, and I put Windows 7 on 2 machines, but I talked him into putting Linux on an older machine that I told him wasn't worth upgrading
Mm-hmm.
because the memory is too old and not
So just I mean, the quality of the software is, especially compared to when proprietary software does bad, annoying things. The quality of our software, free software, has definitely gotten to the point where that in and of itself is a selling point. One more.
So I worked for a large company pulling reports, large data sets for some PDCs and statistics to go through and test how our product was working.
Mm-hmm.
And they would then in turn write reports and go to conferences and have these 20 and 50-page printouts that they would use. And they would start printing something out, and they would find out, halfway through that there was an error in the printout, and they would have to go fix it and print the thing again and wait hours for the printer. And I was like, well, why don't you just print the PDF and link the PDF and figure out if it's got the font you want and all the pages
Mm-hmm.
line up. And they looked at me funny. And I'm like, you just do that, right? And it turns out they were not using Linux as their base or the Linux as their base. So I showed them PDF Creator, showed the one guy PDF Creator. He then spent the next 2 days going through and installing it on everybody else's computer in the company. Like he found this new toy. He was a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
And I saved our company thousands and thousands of dollars of staff hours waiting for these printouts and redoing this stuff so when they can pull it up, go through and look at it, find the error, fix it, and print the PDF again and turn around. Because we had a capability that had been around for 10 or 15 years at that point.
Right.
That somebody else still didn't have as part of their base OS.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Apple with the portable iOS devices. You can get the same presentation application that you can use on OS X, install it on a mobile device, but if it's on the mobile device, you can't connect it to a projector, not because the device won't connect to the projector, but because the software doesn't allow you to project to the projector. So because they want you to buy the desktop version because it costs more money, the laptop version, and use that instead. So yeah, these things that proprietary software just can't do, often because they just don't want to. How long did it take Microsoft Word before it had PDF production support? Right? You had to visit all these random websites that were like convert doc files to PDFs, when we've had the ability to go from a document in an editable format on the computer to a PDF for years. So cool, thanks. Those are, I always like hearing those stories to give new ideas for us and just to know, what's actually, it's really hard when you're an advocacy organization to kind of like measure, is it actually working? Are you actually persuading anybody? And so hearing specific examples is really important for that. So one thing that I've been thinking about is the parallels between the two freedoms that I talked about as being sort of for developers only, and the right to vote. And I think that they're similar because just the existence of the option to modify software, for anybody to modify software, to inspect it, to share it, just that potential has an important effect, which if it became the norm, would really radically change the behavior of software companies and the character of software itself, even if most of those people never actually modified any of the code themselves. So with the right to vote, everyone doesn't have to vote in an election in order for the right to vote to have an impact on the character of the government, right? In fact, in the United States, like most people don't vote, right? What do we have, like 40% or something turnout in lots of elections? Politicians know that there's a potential for people to come out and vote, if they piss them off enough, and that existence of that potential keeps them in check. It's not enough by itself, obviously, hanging chads and whatnot, but it is an important cornerstone foundation of a free society. And I think that if we think about the four freedoms for software, they can work the same way. We don't need everyone actively modifying software in order to deter bad behavior by companies, but we do need everybody to have the right to modify that software, to have that potential. The fact that any given person around the world could step up and remove a backdoor that's installed by Microsoft and redistribute that software would be a really powerful check against the unethical control of individuals through technology. And in some ways, it's even, with the right to vote, you have to persuade a majority of people to do something to vote with you. But when it comes to free software, we don't need a majority, right? We just need individuals to be guaranteed that right, because any individual can grab any free program and make a change to it themselves and share it with everybody else. So in some ways, it's even, within its problem area. Obviously, we're not going to compare free software to like suffrage movements and stopping people from getting killed because of dictatorships. But within its own domain, those freedoms are more powerful for improving the quality of software and for stopping unethical behavior by companies through software than the right to vote is to controlling what governments do. This picture, by the way, was drawn with Blender, which is the awesome 3D animation software. So, yeah, I'm going to ask for another show of hands. How many of you have ever voted? How many of you have voted in every election that you have been eligible to vote in? Thank you. Anybody never voted? Ever? Don't feel bad, because I deliberately didn't vote for a while because I thought that the system was closer to actual change from apathy than it was to electing the right person. But, okay, so we don't vote in every election that we can, except for a few people that should be commended for doing that. But the right to vote still accomplishes a lot in the U.S. It's a key building block, a precondition to having a free society. In the same way, I think that those freedoms for developers only are important for a free technological society. So then, how do you claim your right to vote in the software, election? How do you exercise this right to vote? People often say that spending your dollars is really the only way in order to exercise your preference and show that you want free software and not proprietary software. We hear this a lot at the FSF when we try to say things like there shouldn't be any proprietary software. People say, well, what's the big deal? Proprietary software can exist. If you don't like it, just don't buy it. And that's some truth in that. You shouldn't buy it if you don't want it to exist and if you object to it. That's step one. But that's not really a satisfactory answer to the ethical arguments for why free software is important. It's in our current system, it's kind of like saying, well, it's okay for Los Angeles to eliminate the right to vote because you can just move to Boston instead, right? So there are certain things that we don't put up for just bargaining and decision by consumers and dollars and local decision making. There are certain things that are fundamental. But it's also not an accurate description of the way the proprietary software dynamic works. So you can not buy iPhones all you want, but your tax dollars are still going to support enforcement of the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is the law that enables Apple to lock down its devices and prevent you, to bring criminal charges against you if you distribute tools for unlocking iPhones so that people can install third-party applications on them. Apple argues that that's a circumvention of a technological restriction, technological protection, as they call it, and that you are therefore committing a crime, and they can prosecute you. So your tax dollars are funding the operation of the government to enforce that, the work, the activity of law enforcement. Every time you read a story about a hacker getting arrested for doing something like unlocking his PlayStation and sharing that information, the people in that country are funding that action. And so our societies around the world today effectively subsidize digital disenfranchisement. Right? Our government supports the actions of proprietary software companies to take freedoms away from individuals, and it doesn't matter if you buy the iPhone or not. That's still happening. So this is about more than just not buying things. It's about actually taking action, being an activist, an advocate to remove the laws that subsidize that disenfranchisement and demand free software. So if just not buying proprietary software isn't enough, then what does our free software get out the vote campaign look like? Well, I think it starts with we have to help people identify what things are free. That's not easy to do. You need to look at the EULA for the program, the copyright license. You might have to look at patents that apply to the software. or patent claims about the software. That's a lot to expect anybody to do as an individual. So we need to help provide, if we want people who aren't programmers to support the free software movement, we need to make it easy for them to figure out what software is good for them to use and what software isn't good for them to use. We need to have effective explanations of why this is important, that people actually want to listen to and that work. We need to identify, I'm missing a word there, what hardware is compatible with free software. So when they go to buy a computer, they know which one to get. And we need to provide the software that does what people need. Like multiple of these stories had to do with victory, a success where the quality of the software was important. And that's a good conversation opener, if nothing else, to be able to show people a program that does what they need. And it's also part of just convincing people that a free world is actually possible. That all programs won't disappear if we freely share them. Programmers won't starve. In fact, we've been doing this thing for a while, and it's produced this great software. Even if the quality of the software isn't the main reason we want people to support the free software movement, the quality of the software demonstrates that a free society is good, that this works, that will produce things that you can use. You won't have to give things up. And we need to provide free documentation for people to learn more about the technology they use. Just like when you talk about the right to vote, we want to provide good information so that people make good votes, right? They make educated choices. We want everybody to not be susceptible to various scams and things like that. And that in the free software movement, the analogy I think is providing free documentation that can be shared and modified just like the software that people can learn from. So maybe they don't want to be a full-time programmer, but they do want to learn a little bit about how this one program that they use works. Like to the extent that I do any program these days, it's to make very small changes in things that I use. And that's one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is being full-time, making this your profession. We want to help get that information out there so people, if they choose to, can become more literate, more understanding about the technology that they use. So for the first thing, helping people identify what's free, we have some logos at the FSF available for this. Here's one for the AGPL, which is a free software license. But we need more logos. We need better logos. We need simpler ones that aren't about just a license, what specific license the software is distributed under. Something that you could put on your page that says this program is free software. Pretty simple. We're going to hopefully be able to get some nice designs for that done. But if you are a graphic artist and want to work on a project like this, that would be awesome. For effective explanations that people actually want to sit through, that's an area where the FSF has been putting in more effort than we have in the past, going beyond just text on a page to explore some other avenues for explaining free software. This is a video that we did working with a company called Urchin back in December, and they're awesome. They do 3D animations that are really fantastic looking, and they use all free software to do it. So we were able to not only get a good video out of this, but also support the work of people that are kind of practicing the freedoms that we want everybody to have. Have people seen the video? Anybody? Yeah. I think it's only less than 3 minutes long. I think I'm just going to go ahead and play it since not very many people have seen it. And in doing so, hopefully not break everything else about this presentation.
Software is all around us, and sometimes inside us. But what happens when the tools we use are obeying someone else? A tool you control serves your interests, but if someone else controls it, they serve their own. When you can examine tools to see how they work,
Please hold.
you're able to...
Yeah, I know. That's, full screen and multiple monitors is an interesting combination. Set up.
Software is all around us, and sometimes inside us. But what happens when the tools we use are obeying someone else? A tool you control serves your interests, but if someone else controls it, they serve their own. When you can examine tools to see how they work, you're able to learn about them.
All right.
Even modify them to work differently or better. When
I'm
you
not
can
going to
share a tool and its changes,
mess
you
with
help
this
others,
anymore
and in
since
turn,
it's
they
not
help
doing
you.
what I want, but you get a sense of
In
the
fact,
video
this is how early
without
computers
hearing the
started.
audio. It's pretty
Everyone
professional
can
looking.
program
It's
the
very
code, and
high
people
quality.
split
It's
their work
attention
freely
grabbing.
to drive its
It's the kind of thing we want to do a lot more of if we can get the resources to do it.
Every
So it's on the front
user
page of
has the potential
fsf.org
to
right now.
offer.
I encourage you to go, spend
But when
3 minutes
companies
after this
began
presentation to
lock
watch
source
it.
code away, it stopped being
It's like
possible to
mesmerizing. I like
replicate,
watching it.
or even to know what the code was doing.
And it's just, trying to make some basic points about the
In
importance
response,
of
hackers
sharing
tried
and
to
collaboration to
create a
producing
computer system designed
cultural
to
works
inspect
and protecting people's freedoms, especially against things like surveillance. So now let's see if I can get the rest of the presentation back. Ha. I'd also recommend, so RMS last year, watching his videos, all of his talks on audiovideo.canu.org is a great place to start anyway, but he did one particular talk last year for TEDx, which I think was particularly successful. It's about 20 minutes or so. It's longer than 3 minutes, but still not too long for people to watch if they get a little bit interested and want to learn more about the topic. And he's got some nice visual slides and aids to go along with his presentation. So that's another good one to check out if you're looking for materials to introduce people to this. And that's, if you just go to fsf.org and click on About and then the What is Free Software page, and we have it embedded there. In general, we're trying to make that page look a bit nicer and more appealing as a place where people can point to that's not the full free software definition proper. And then we need the hardware. We need to mark what hardware is compatible with a fully free system. And our goal here really is to make it so that you can walk into a store and find a laptop that has this mark on it, this Respect Your Freedom logo, the certification mark. The FSF evaluates products that are submitted to us by different companies, and we make sure that they don't require any proprietary software to use. We make sure they don't come with any proprietary software, and then we give the company permission to use this mark, and they can use it in their materials, and then we also help promote these products quite a bit. So we want people to be able to walk into a store and find hardware, accessories, laptops, mobile devices, and everything that has this mark on it. And that way people don't have to, it's a lot of work. I mean, we need more people at the FSF focusing on this because we're a bottleneck right now. We have more devices submitted to us than we've been able to review so far because to test, go through all of the parts of laptop, to make sure that there's nothing proprietary there, it takes quite a bit of time. And oftentimes we do find a little something, and then we need to work with a company. They've submitted it to us. They want to meet the criteria if they can. So the back and forth in order to get them to fix anything that we do find also takes time. So you certainly can't expect someone who wants to purchase a computer in the store to do all that work themselves. We need to make it easy for them to support us. Yeah. Question?
How many times have you been successful in convincing the manufacturers to simply change the design a little bit or open source their software for proprietary apps?
Yeah, so the question is, how many times have you been successful in convincing a manufacturer to distribute their previously proprietary stuff as free software? One example I can think of with Chris here from Think Penguin was the work with Atheros to get the proprietary blob for one of their Wi-Fi cards actually released as free software. So they had a chipset which required a proprietary blob, and some of the engineers at Atheros were interested in releasing it as a free product, as free software, and Chris helped them do that. And so the FSF didn't do that directly, but that was a result of, related to, I think, our endorsement program. And then Think Penguin started selling the resulting Wi-Fi device, and we were able to endorse that with our mark. So, it's not having the impact that we want it to yet by any means, but we are seeing those signs of hope. And, as we build momentum for this, as there are more devices out there, then it becomes more of a thing that manufacturers might want to pay attention to, because if people are familiar with the mark and looking for it, then they'll be more likely to be interested in meeting the criteria. So just to run through some of the products that we've certified under this, we have a few models of the Lulzbot, which is a 3D printer that meets the respect for freedom criteria. The X60, as sold by Glug in the UK, has even the BIOS replaced with Libre Boots, which is free software. So a typical laptop or ThinkPad has proprietary boot level firmware. So even if you run a fully free operating system like Triskel or something like that, you still have non-free software running below the operating system. The laptop from Glug actually removes that as well and gives you a fully free system. These are a couple of Wi-Fi devices like I was just talking about that you can get from ThinkPenguin. And one of the recent ones that I was most excited about was the actual home router that, everybody needs a Wi-Fi router, and now you can buy one that has no proprietary software on it. This is something that's been possible for a long time, but nobody's done it. So I'm really excited that now you can buy one. My mom needed a new router over Christmas. We got one of these and set it up. It works like any other router that somebody might expect to have from Linksys, and it works just as well. And Bob here, actually, I think Penguin is behind the Libre CMC distribution that runs on the router. So that's, to me, this is a product that lots of people could use. Maybe more than a laptop that's too out of date for some people. But we did, by the way, just recently certify an X200 sold by Glug, which is, I happen to be using an X200 already. It's been my laptop for a while. It does everything that I need to do. I don't particularly need a more powerful computer. Now from Glug, you can actually purchase an X200 that's had the BIOS replaced and comes with a fully free operating system pre-installed on it. So we're catching up. We're thanks to the work of some great people that care about these issues, and we have the certification program to help promote that work. We also have hnode.org in the hardware area. This is a database which is a great place to look if you are buying a new machine and you want to see which components are supported by free drivers. So it has peripherals and laptop components. This is a project that needs some help in terms of the site design and the code that runs the site. We also need a lot more information to be contributed to it. This is all powered by user-contributed information about the components that they have on their system and whether they work with a free operating system or not. So, and we really want to work on some tools that will enable people to submit compatibility information from their laptop just by running a script that'll upload that information to the database, so they don't themselves have to be too familiar with how to figure out which component is tied to which driver on their system. So if you're interested in any of those things, please talk to me. hnode.org is run mostly by volunteers. The FSF just hosts it and helps organize it, but we definitely need more people working on it. And then we have to provide the software that people need, of course. And we're doing a pretty great job of that already in the free software movement, but there are some pretty big holes. And so the FSF maintains the high priority projects list, which lists some of those things, areas where people feel like they still have to use proprietary software, things like Skype, for doing video calls or voice over IP communication. A lot of people think that the free tools aren't there yet to compete with Skype. Video editing is another big one that people feel like they still have to use, I don't know, iMovie, is that the, whatever. There's a list of these things that we think are high priorities, and we've had it basically the same for quite a while. We've had some successes. One thing that was on there for a while was a donor and contributor management system for nonprofits, because at the FSF we found that there wasn't a good free program for doing that. We were able to announce that as a success and remove it from the list because we found that CiviCRM, when we evaluated it, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, actually met the criteria, and it's AGPL licensed software. It's fantastic. And so the FSF switched over to that and announced that as a success and the resolution of a high priority need. But there's still lots of things on there, and we just last year put together a committee that is going to help us review this list. And it's a committee of experts from different parts of the free software world who have expertise in software close to the hardware and security issues and desktop systems. And they're reviewing the list, and they're going to publish a set of recommendations that the FSF will then evaluate and make changes to our list. And I'm kind of hoping that this will turn into an annual state of free software kind of document that we could publish each year that would give kind of an update on where the free software movement stands, where the free software world stands in relation to the contemporary needs that users have for their computers. One of the things that the committee is doing is evaluating suggestions from the public. So please, if you have thoughts about what the free software world is sorely missing, you can email them to hpp-feedback@gnu.org. And those suggestions will be considered during the process. And you should do that soon because we're hoping to announce some of the updates at the LibrePlanet conference in March. So if you want to do that, please try to get those in soon. And I think it's important to do that because everybody has different experiences with software that works well for them or totally fails for them. You know, when I say we don't have a Skype replacement yet, some people are like, well, you know, Jitsi works fine for me or Akigo works fine for me. But other people say it doesn't even start on my computer. So individual stories are really important for assessing how well things are actually working the way that they're described as working. And we need the documentation to improve technical literacy, like I talked about. One effort that the FSF did several years ago at LibrePlanet in conjunction with FLOSS Manuals, which is an awesome organization that helps basically crowdsource, collaborate to produce new free documentation for free software. We worked with them to produce this book called Introduction to the Command Line that you can get at shop.fsf.org. And it's just what it says. It's a tutorial for people that are just getting started, want to learn a little bit how to use the shell. Or if you want, you can buy this from Amazon for $105.36 plus shipping. I have no idea why it's that expensive, but that is the cheapest price for it new on Amazon. By the way, we encourage people not to purchase from Amazon for various reasons, but if you do, anyway, you can donate to the FSF by using smile.amazon.com and specifying the Free Software Foundation as your charity of choice. It's smile.amazon.com. So if you're not persuaded to not use Amazon, then at least you can have a little bit of their money come back to a good cause. So we would really like to do more like this, produce more books, you know, for how to run a new organization using only free software, a new nonprofit, or you know how to install, how to put together a free system, you know, how to track down those components, what you can buy. There's lots of opportunities, and I think it's something the FSF actually needs to do a lot more of. And of course, this is a freely licensed book, so the purchase price is just to get it in paper version, but you can also just get the online version. So in order to do more things like this, you know, to produce new materials, to accelerate the hardware endorsement program, to help motivate free software development in key areas, and in some cases even fund it, you know, to do more documentation, to do any of these things, we need support from the community. We need support from individuals like you. The FSF is actually 80% funded by individuals. So we, I think, probably receive the lowest amount of contributions from corporations in the space, you know, and we want it that way because we want to be representing individuals and making sure that what we're doing is in the interest of individuals and not just in the interest of larger organizations. So you can join as a member to support us. We have a newsletter I encourage you to subscribe to if you're not already. And while I just said that we are proud of being funded primarily by individuals, we of course would welcome additional funding from your employers. You know, if your employer uses free software, then encourage them to check out our patron program and consider donating to the FSF and put them in touch with me. I would also, you know, love to go on the road and show up to your workplace and give a little presentation in your conference room if you ever have guest speakers, that sort of thing. And the last thing here is Reddit is having some kind of vote right now for charities that they're going to donate 10% of their ad revenue for. I don't think this is over yet, but I think it's about to end if it hasn't already. So if you're a Reddit user already, please, you know, log in and cast a vote for us. So I just wanted to put that strategy out there of explaining the importance of free software by comparing it to things like the right to vote, that we don't all have to modify code in order for that ability to have a powerful impact and to be a catalyst for major changes in society in terms of the way software is distributed and used. And then I tried to walk through, you know, some of the things that the FSF does specifically in order to essentially run a Get Out the Vote campaign and actually make that possible, make that a reality. So we'd love to hear any suggestions from you all. We have still a few minutes to ask questions or discuss these things.
On my business card, it says intellectual property is an oxymoron.
Uh-huh.
And there's a reason why I say that. It's not on the business card, but I made a T-shirt that says the same thing. And on the back side of the T-shirt it says, even the most original ideas are gifts from God.
Hmm. So it's the intellectual property. The statement was intellectual property is an oxymoron because you ideas come from God, or ideas come, if not from, if you don't believe in that, ideas come from other places that aren't you. We that's one. The FSF is very careful to not be Republican or Democrat or Libertarian because we think that free software is a foundation for any kind of advocacy work whatsoever, no matter what your specific positions are. And I think that one example of a lot of people who are on the conservative side of the political spectrum support free software because the regulations, which are grouped under the misnomer intellectual property, things like copyrights, patents, those are like artificial creations by the government, essentially. Those aren't real things. Those are categories of property, categories of stuff to be treated like property that's just manufactured by the government. And free software is a way to take things back to a true market in that way. And that's one reason conservatives often support us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think so. The statement is that we need that there are lots of places in political discussions where people, even though they're not themselves a climate scientist, they still care about possible climate change, and I think that gives hope for being able to convince people that free software isn't just for geeks who care about software; it's for everybody. And I think those analogies can help out a lot. The environmental one in particular has worked in a lot of cases. When we ran our campaign against Windows Vista, when that came out, we had a strong partnership with Greenpeace, who was especially concerned about the fact that a lot of computers were going to be thrown in the trash for no reason other than that they couldn't support Vista's new requirements. And then for our side, we said, well, Vista's new requirements have a lot to do with just imposing DRM on you and don't actually increase the power of the computing you really want to do. So you really should take this moment to get off the treadmill. And there's lots of other environmental impacts of proprietary software. And I kind of use the environmental labeling movement as a benchmark for us. The first thing that we want to try to achieve is how can we get our Respect Your Freedom certification to be as prevalent as the indicators about percentage of recycled material or other environmental friendly measures that you see on products at the store now. It's you might not care about that. You might think recycling is a stupid idea, and that's fine. But the success of that movement of getting manufacturers to display that information on their products is something that I want us to be able to achieve, in a similar way. Any question? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Right. we have the GPL, our copyleft license, which in a lot of ways helps deal with the fact that we can't very easily accomplish change in the legal system. We ultimately, the FSF would really like to see copyright law radically changed. But until we can do that, the GPL provides a shield for us. So pushing, promoting those licenses, making them better over time, helping people use them is one way that we cope with the legal system without actually changing the laws. But other things that we do, so there's a bill in the New York State legislature right now for requiring that free software be preferred in government decisions about software. There's our partner organization, Free Software Foundation Europe, does a lot of work for procurement rules for the EU to try to accomplish some of that. There was a great bill that was passed in Italy for promoting, for requiring free software to get preference for all the reasons that you might think, because it often costs less money, because it gives the government autonomy, control over their computers. They're not dependent on a proprietary software company. So the FSF is involved in various ways in making that happen, but especially in the United States, we find that it's very difficult to get laws changed. While we're trying to do that, we also need to be figuring out strategies for coping with the way that things are. And of course, we have different nonprofit organization definitions. So the FSF is a 501c3 charity, which means that we're not allowed to do political lobbying. We can do a little bit. Everybody's allowed to do a little bit, but we can't make that a very substantial part of our work. But I think it would be great for somebody to launch a big organization that would do lobbying for free software and would play all of the games that you have to play in order to get the attention of Congress people. But that's just not something that we can do specifically. But it probably does need to be done. We're seeing some change also through the legislature, through the court system. The FSF has submitted a couple amicus briefs in Supreme Court cases against software patents. And one of them, CLS Bank versus Alice, recently. Since then, we're seeing definitely more scrutiny being applied to software patents, and some of them are being shot down. So we can achieve change through that route as well, instead of having to get the laws necessarily changed at the congressional level. But we want to really get better at building. We need laws get changed. If it's coming from an interest from the public, it's going to take a lot of the public, right? The laws that get changed oftentimes get changed because they affect some large corporation with a lot of money. We don't necessarily have that, although we think lots of corporations should join us in order to get laws passed for free software. But we want to focus on changing the public attitude towards software, and then hope that that leads to more pressure for change on places like Congress. So I think that's 2:30. Thank you all very much. I'm going to be around for the rest of the day till tomorrow. Feel free to find me and talk to me about any of this. Thank you.